Hi guys and welcome, Knemon here. In this video I'll take you on a comprehensive tour on the carpet mod for Minecraft 1.14 and 1.15, specifically for 1.14.4 and whatever Mojang has released for 1.15 in the form of snapshots. In order to better navigate through the content of the video, here is a list of sections we will be covering today, in case you want to jump straight to the section that interests you the most, but in case you are watching this the first time or you are new to the carpet mod and you want to learn more about it, just get your snacks, kick back and enjoy. So what is carpet mod? Carpet mod is a set of modifications to the game that give you more control over the game, allow you to understand better what happens to it, remove certain annoying bugs and inefficiencies in the game, and provides alternatives for some glaring missing features or alternative solutions where the vanilla features feel a little bit lacking. What is important is whatever you do, your world will still be fully compatible with vanilla, so if you don't need these tools anymore, you can always go back to vanilla at any point without any side effects in your world. When you open your world the first time with the carpet mod, the game will be behaving exactly like your vanilla game. All the features, behaviors and fixes are turned off by default, and each feature needs to be explicitly turned on to have an effect. What is turned on by default is all these extra carpet commands, which wouldn't do anything unless you would actually use them. And these can still be turned off by your server administration if they want to. To turn on a particular feature, you need to enable it via the carpet command, typing /carpet, feature name, and its new value. That changes the specified behavior temporarily until you shut down the server or restart your world. But you can set it up to some different default value. If you click on this link, that will give you a new command that you can accept to enable that settings at startup. At any point you can display all modified carpet settings, typing /carpet by itself, and to display the settings that are permanent, so these that would load at startup, type /carpet list defaults. With carpet remove default, we can remove a setting from a default list and make it so it will always default to vanilla upon restart. With carpet list, we can also search for settings either by browsing a specific category or just search by a substring. So if you, for example, search for owl, we'll get the 5 settings matching that phrase. It's useful in case you kinda remember the setting you are interested in but kinda forgot it at the same time. By typing /carpet, we are not only getting current active settings, but also the clickable list of all the settings categories. So let's check, for example, all the survival and all the feature settings. And as you can see, here we have all the settings that belong to these categories. We can hover over each one of them to bring a little tool tips indicating what each setting does. And if you click a value on the right, we can change it to one of the predefined values. In this case, you need to confirm that to set it. Or you can click, for example, on the rule itself to bring its individual chat menu, and we can click again on each option that we see right here. So it is just a command, but it has some clickable navigation to it, as much as a game chat allows at least. So as you have seen, all the carpet settings are organized in categories and default to false, or whatever is the default in the vanilla game. And that's except the commands, which don't affect the game mechanics unless you call them explicitly, so they are enabled by default. In carpet, all the carpet commands have low permission level, meaning all players can use them, but they can be disabled on individual basis by the admins with the carpet settings command. Now let's go over each function in detail. Game control. So first function of the carpet mod is the tick command, which is a very popular and very versatile set of tools that allow to control how fast the game is running, as well as to monitor what takes that precious compute resources, which could potentially cause the game to lag. By far the most popular feature of the carpet mod is tick warp command that allows to let the game run as fast as it can for a set amount of ticks, while allowing it to perform all the tasks each game tick as it needs to. This allows not only to assess how much impact your contraption has on the game performance, but also to speed up the time to get the results of a time experiment faster. In this case, 72,000 ticks is the equivalent of 1 hour of waiting. Additional option with tick warp is the fact that we can add a command to the end of it, which will be executed when the warp is finished, which can be used in further automation of tests. In case some other player is already advancing time, in order not to disturb with their experiments, new warps are not possible until the previous one is done. However, anybody can stop current tick warp by typing tick warp 0 or just tick warp. On the opposite spectrum, you can freeze the game by typing tick freeze, which will pause some aspects of the game, like processing of entities, world clocks, block events and updates, allowing players to move freely and observe what happens in this frozen state. While frozen, players can advance the time by a set amount of ticks with tick step command, which will allow the game to advance in a controllable manner. It's a very useful tool to make observations on contraptions that can change quickly and when timing is crucial. You can always unfreeze the game with tick freeze again. Just remember to type this command manually and not run it with a command block, because freezing of the redstone freezes command blocks as well. Tick freeze, which has very practical applications, has a sister command, tick superhot, which freezes the game only when players don't move. This simulates quite well a concept introduced by the game Superhot, where time flies only when players move. It's a really cool game mode to try to complete some really challenging maps with a different twist. Obviously, in this game mode, the game will always be a little easier, but you can always ramp up the difficulty to match the challenge level. I really encourage you to try it. It's super fun. At last, and the most straightforward way to manipulate the time is with the tick rate command, which changes the base tick clock of the game. It's not as powerful and complex as tick warp in speeding up the game and tick freeze in stopping it, but does the time manipulations in the least invasive way, while the other methods may produce some artifacts from the fact that we are doing something to the game that the game wasn't designed to do in the first place. With tick rate, it all happens exactly how it was planned, just faster or slower. If you are slowing down the game with tick rate, you may notice that despite being slower, some client-side animations are played with normal speeds. If you don't like it, you can switch smooth client animations, and that would smooth and stretch out all client-side rendering to match the lower tick rate, but you have to know that this will also slow down player movement and player controls. But if you care to see it in details what happens, let's say, with systems with lots of pistons, that might be a good option to turn on. Tick command has two monitoring options up its sleeve, tick health and tick entities, which act as an internal profiler that tells what takes resources in the game. By default, it monitors the game for 5 seconds or 100 ticks, but this also can be configured by the command. Tick health aggregates how much time on average per tick and per dimension certain components took to process, which includes network, autosave, asynchronous or off-tick tasks, mob spawning, chunk loading, unloading, block updates, entity ticks, block entity ticks, villages and raids, and environment processes. If some of the categories I mentioned do not show up in the final rundown, this means that they didn't contribute to the final tally. Everything that didn't end up in any of the above mentioned categories will end up in the rest. All in all, your tick time should always be below 50 milliseconds. If it's above that, this means that your world is already lagging behind. Since typically the main culprits of the performance problems are entities and block entities, there is also tick entities command that perform a similar profiling round, just taking note about each entities and block entities, returning top 10 objects in terms of top counts, which is a little less important, and top CPU hogs, indicating how long it took on average per tick for each of these categories. This very often explains a lot what causes troubles in the world for you. If you need even more detailed breakdown, you can finally use the built-in vanilla profiler, which gained a lot of value in 1.13 and 1.14, but in most cases this should be more than sufficient to find out what's wrong going on. Another important feature is the spawn command, which provides all the info and control over mob spawning, which is extremely useful in designing proper mob farms. Spawn list allows us to check what mobs are able to spawn at a particular spot. Note that if you are taking coordinates off from a block that you are looking at, it's likely you'll be targeting a block that would collide with any mob, hence indicating that nothing could spawn in here. One practical way of avoiding this inconvenience is to use a tilde notation, checking for mobs to spawn where the player is staying. But Carpet has another convenient shortcut, which I'll be talking about later, which is using carpets. In this case, placing a pink carpet can work the same way as checking the spawn list in that block, assuming there was no carpet. And that's all because you might want to use that command multiple times, to find slime chunks, to find borders of structures, making sure mobs can spawn your mob farm with maximum efficiency, or just to figure out what is the mob composition we have at certain spots, since these things tend to change. On the results page, we see our targeted coordinates and what is the top non-air block above our spot. The higher it is, the more dispersed are the spawn attempts on this particular column of blocks. That's why it's really beneficial to build your mob farms low and not to have any unnecessary blocks above it. Then follows the list of mobs that could spawn in this location. In general, the line is green if a mob has a non-zero chance of spawning here. It starts with a mob group, monsters, creatures or passive mobs, ambient mobs and water mobs, which are not here. Then is the mob name, its weight to be randomly selected for spawning at this location within its group. And then you can see, since we are in the desert, we'll most likely get spiders, skeletons, creepers, slimes and husks, while other mobs including zombies have less chance of spawning, with zombie villager having only 1 point, so chance of finding a zombie villager in the desert is like 1 over 500 something. Then we have a potential pack size, so most mobs will spawn in packs of 4, but enderman packs can be smaller, ranging from 1 to 4, and witches always spawn individually. The pack size of 4 doesn't mean that all 4 mobs will have to spawn, just will have always 4 attempts of this mob type here. Can means if that specific location for spawning is appropriate, which is true for all of these here. But if, for example, decide to try to spawn on cactus, no mobs can spawn on cactus. And then we have a test whether a specific mob will fit in here, and that test for block collisions. So for example here spiders and slimes will not be able to spawn at all, and if they can and they will fit, here are the odds of successful spawning. For instance, in bright light all monsters will fail to spawn due to light conditions. Sometimes you may see while doing this test 1 or 2 blinking mobs when testing for spawning, and that's because some conditions of spawning are predefined for selected mobs. So I have to spawn here 1000 mobs per list element to get this probability over here. So occasionally you may see spiders from spider jockeys or baby ocelots spawning with parents, etc. Just to warn you that this is normal and is part of the process to get you accurate spawning chances for each mob. Overall chance of mob spawning in your farm is a combination of the will chances and the weight of that mob has in its category. And that's why, for example, drown, despite having tons of spawning spaces in the oceans, have extremely slim chance of doing it due to very low weight and very low willing percentages. Command spawn entities with the mob category will tell us the exact locations of all the mobs that count towards that mob cap. Very useful to find these pesky varmints taking up the mob cap for mobs in your farm. By the way, most coordinates you see here on the screen are actually clickable, so be careful about that because they'll teleport you to those places. Command spawn mob caps displays current mob cap per category and how many mobs are detected in each category. If the current number of mobs exceeds the allowed amount, no mobs will be spawning in this category. By default it shows mob cap in the dimension player is in, but we can request mob caps from other dimensions as well, like so. And that's not just monitoring. We can increase and decrease the mob caps by changing the base mob count, which is 70 hostile mobs per player, to some number we want, with spawn mobs cap set, and then the new mob cap for the hostile mobs. So for example 210, that's 3 times more mobs per player, and other mob groups will be scaled up appropriately to that value. Are you bothered that with 210 hostile mobs you're getting 45 bats? I know, no one likes them, but with carpet mod it's easy peasy. We can also change the rate in which they spawn. Spawn rates, ambient 0, bam. No bats will be able to spawn from now on. But you can request so they will spawn even 10 times per tick as well, still honoring the mob caps. Quite useful for testing stuff in certain situations. When you messed up something, you can type spawn rates reset, which will bring you everything back to vanilla. And all of these changes, since they are not part of the carpet command, are only temporary. If you mess up something, just restart your world and everything will be back to normal. Oh, speaking of messing up, you can always enable spawn mocking. In this mode, mobs will not be appearing in the world, like with the mob spawning turned off, yet spawning algorithm will still be going trying to spawn these mobs. Why would you want to do that? No idea. Just kidding. With this option you can directly measure the top spawning potential of your mob farm design, regardless what you need to do with the mobs after they spawn. This will give you the upper bounds of the spawn rates in your farm. But how would you be able to measure it? I'm glad you asked. With spawn tracking. Since tracking spawns costs a little bit of CPU money, you need to start it with spawn tracking start and stop it with spawn tracking stop. This stops the tracking but also displays the report that you can also display at any point when you are tracking spawns with spawn tracking. Pretty straightforward. We'll talk about the report later. You can also start tracking with a cubic bounding box, and this will only track mob spawns inside this bounding box. Pretty cool stuff. At any point in time when you're tracking, you can not only display the tracking report, but also list all the recent spawns in each mob category with spawn tracking and then follow with the mob type. This works similarly to spawn entities, but in this case it will show you a few most recent spawns no matter if the mob is there or not. This is especially useful when you just build a perimeter and you know there must be a few spawning spaces left and never had a chance to caught those pesky varmints. You can use tracking to track down these last few remaining spawning spaces, even if it takes an hour to do so. You can speed up the time with tick command, so you don't need to wait that hour. So what's up with the tracking report? It actually carries a lot of answers to a lot of your questions, so I better go in details what each number here means. First of all types of all dimensions are here counted separately, so we see only overworld spawns at the moment because there is no one else in the other dimensions. In general, each mob category gets its own statistics as all mobs from it spawn together. This follows with average number of mobs per tick in this category. The closer to the mob cap, this means that the more mobs are spawning, but also more ticks missed because of full mob caps. This is not that meaningful by itself without these other three numbers. First is the percentage of ticks that spawning didn't happen due to filled mob caps, and then the percentage of ticks where mob cap wasn't filled but spawning failed due to no appropriate conditions or bad RNG lag to get any mobs to spawn. And the last number is the percentage of ticks when the game managed to spawn some mobs. How many? On average we get this number, which indicates in the successful spawn ticks how many mobs per tick on average happen to spawn. For optimal farm design, you want the mobs per tick number to be as high as possible with the filled mob caps indicator to be as low as possible. And then we get a breakdown for each mob type, how many actual spawns happened and how many mobs was that per hour. With this report you can very easily tell not only how many mobs spawn in your farm design, but also does this farm suck, and if it does, where, and what is the problem. So you can go back to the drawing board and come up with something more better. So that will be it in terms of the spawn command, but there is one more handy shortcut. Spawn test is nothing special, but it's a handy shortcut to reset the current spawn tracking and start a new one. Reset the hopper counters so they will start counting items again. We haven't talked about hopper counters yet, we'll go back to them soon. And also speeds up the game with tick warp for an hour by default. Since you normally would want to do all of these three actions anyways when testing a farm of any sort, this is a convenient shortcut to get it all in one place. Under the total game control fall a couple other carpet settings and features. One is the ability to disable spawn chunks. Normally the game part of a player loaded area keeps one area in the overworld loaded at all times, called spawn chunks. In normal circumstances, this is a very useful place to have, but for some testing you might want to opt to remove it, and you can do it by disabling the spawn chunks. Another related settings you can tweak is view distance, which doesn't work in single player because in single player you can just change it yourself in the settings, but it can be very useful in a server where you can't fiddle with the view distance settings until you restart the server. With Carpet you can not only change it in-game but also on the fly without the need of the server restart. Oh, and there's also super secret settings, but it wouldn't be a secret if I told you what it does, isn't it? So remember to keep it off at all times, otherwise something really nasty will happen, okay? Awesome. Great that you're cool about it. Game monitoring and creative tools. There's a bunch of additional monitoring tools that do not affect or change the game mechanics that much, like tick or spawn commands. First is the hopper counters with accompany counter command. To enable them, you have to turn hopper counter settings on, and from now on, hoppers that point into wool blocks in any shape, form, connection and direction, instead of collecting items, will be counting and removing them. By using the existing hopper mechanics, we can ensure that there is no extra lag with these counters. And by the nature of how they count items, this means that each hopper counter can handle, for stackable items, up to 500,000 items per hour. And this is also a very realistic way of counting items, since in most farms you need to bring your items to some sort of chest or a container, so your items would need to pass through a hopper anyways. To measure instead of collect, just replace the container with a wool block. The color of the wool indicates which channel is used to count the items, so players have up to 16 channels to choose from, and all hopper pointing to the same wool will count items together. To display counted items, type /counter, which will display all counters, /counter with a color to display items for that counter only, and counter color real time to display the rates with respect to the actual clock, not the in-game clock, which will be different if your game is lagging behind. To reset the counters, type counter reset, or you can do it selectively for any color, and then the counters will start counting items again. When you display the counted items, you get the reference collection time, how many items were counted in total, and what this ends up being per hour, as well as a breakdown for each item type. There is also a handy X in the corner, allowing us to quickly reset a given counter so it starts counting again. As mentioned before, part of the side effects of running spawn test is resetting of all the requested counters. Distance command is a handy measuring tape providing distances between 2 points in meters. Spherical or Euclidean or distance in a straight line. Then you have cylindrical, so the beacon distance or the straight line distance discarding the y coordinate. And then we have Manhattan or taxicab distance, or how many blocks do I need to connect these 2 points type of distance. Very handy is the fact that the command will remember our starting position and allow us to measure as many times as we need to our starting point. It's even simpler to use with carpets, but about that in a moment. Info command displays some useful information about blocks. There used to be a similar command for entities, but in 1.14 Mojang added data command that is providing similar information, so I made the decision not to support it anymore. Did you use info entity command in previous versions like 1.12, 1.13? Was it useful to you? Is data get entity command good enough? Or do you think info entity should be back? Please let me know in the comments. The track command is a new command that enables a number of modifications that provide some extra information that is important in certain scenarios in the game that involve the hidden state of entities. So far, 2 behaviors have been implemented. When track villager breeding is enabled, villagers will display total food they have available for breeding, whether they have a bed associated with them, and their breeding cooldown. When interacted with an emerald, they will point to their bed they have chosen. When you interact with the rotten flesh, they will clear up their food supplies, and clicking them with a bed will mark all the beds around them that they can recognize as occupied, free, and inaccessible. Each villager is required to see 1 free bed in order to successfully breed. With iron golem spawning, they will show whether they slept recently, worked recently, and are in panic mode, which are requirements for golems to spawn. The last thing they will display is the last time they've seen a golem, which also prevents them from summoning more iron golems. With each golem spawn attempt, they will also display a barrier particle above their head, so you can monitor how many spawn attempts you got that, for example, didn't result in golem being spawned. Most of this monitoring that you have seen uses the mob custom name, meaning it will mess up in case you have named your villagers previously, so these tools should be only used in your test worlds. Bug fixes. There is a number of bug fixes and optimizations that Carpet mod provides that fix certain issues with vanilla game, but since many of them are used by technical players as cool features, these, like all things in Carpet, are optional and disabled by default. There has been a lot of bug fixes in the past in previous versions of Carpet mod that has been finally fixed by Mojang in vanilla game, and because of the good communication we have right now with Mojang team, there is not that many Carpet settings in this category, but there are still some annoying aspects that you might want to have switched on. Horse Wandering Fix fixes issues with horses trying to pathfind to locations that were selected by them prior to the ride, causing them quite often to slowly wander into the distance after long horse travels. After enabling this fix, horses will stand still after players dismount them. This fix also attempts to solve some of the horse and boats turning invisible issues, although that solution is not complete and doesn't work in all circumstances, so more research is needed, as they say. Sometimes when we load a chunk with mobs attached to leads, the leads don't visually appear or disappear altogether. Turning on lead fix makes sure leads appear properly for all players. In vanilla, if you are in the crafting window and want to chug entire stacks from your inventory with Ctrl Q, you can do that with the crafting results slot despite the ability to craft all of it into the inventory. With Ctrl Q crafting fix enabled, you can chug all the stacks at once. Portals, when moving entities between dimensions, don't take entity size into consideration. That's why, with portals of vastly different sizes, there's a high chance to end up inside the obsidian. Or you might want to use it for your advantage, but in general, that's not good. Portal suffocation fix adjusts the target teleport location to account for the entity size, so you always end up in the portal. And this fix also applies to other mobs like horses. With 1.14 we got back infamous mining ghost blocks. Turning mining ghost blocks fix on will enable procedures that will remove them when you are running carpet mode in your single player, when you are connecting to a carpet server with vanilla client, as well as when you are connecting with carpet client to a vanilla server. However, this particular issue has been already addressed in 1.15, and you can hope that in 1.15 you won't need this fix anymore. Optimizations. There's a bunch of optimizations that you can turn on with carpet that allows the game to run smoother. The first optimization is fast redstone dust, which is a re-implementation of redstone dust update system by Theosib that greatly reduces the cost of powering and depowering of the redstone dust, which is the primary and most widely known method of transmitting signals. It allows for making much larger contraptions without the fear of lagging the game. Max entity collisions allows to mitigate some performance problems by having too many mobs colliding in one space. However, setting it to a low number will change how mobs in large groups are pushing each other, so you have to be careful with that. Lag-free spawning reduces cost of mob spawning by optimizing code responsible for calculating block collisions as well as the actual mob creation. This change is a proper optimization, which means that it doesn't cause any additional changes and side effects with vanilla spawning, is just a little bit cheaper to run. Portal caching fixes problems with portal causing massive lag if not used for 15 seconds. With portal caching enabled, this will keep all the valid connections forever or until something changes in the portal configuration. Portal linking with this option enabled will work exactly the same way, except you won't be getting this lag spikes. This option is not available in 1.15 version of the carpet mod, since Mojang has rewritten portal linking using points of interest system. We have to wait and see if the final solution that they propose is really lag free, and if not, for sure the settings will have its comeback to 1.15 at some point as well. Creative tools. Creative mode, apart from giving players invincibility, access to all resources and flying, doesn't offer that much more compared to the survival mode. So here are some of the creative tools and features that carpet mode has to offer to improve creative building and design. Player command is a very powerful command that allows to control players, real and fake ones. So we should start with just creating a fake player. So let's spawn a fake one, and for the start let's spawn a Jeb, who is the Minecraft lead developer, but in case we spawn an actual player that may log in, the player will replace its fake counterpart where they are in. By default, the player spawns in the location of the invoking player and in the same game mode, but you can customize player spawning fully with the command. You can do many things to the players with the player command. Let's maybe give Jeb some item. Okay, now maybe let's ask him to drop it. Here we go. Maybe let's now spoil a wild cat and just ask Jeb to ride it. Okay, that's enough. Just dismount him. Now let's let him look east. Okay, then let's make him start walking forward. Okay, now let's make him stop. Stopping will not only stop movement, but also cancels all the actions that the players are doing. Now let's give him a pickaxe. Now let's swap his hands and give them a stack of steak. Okay, now let's swap again. Now we can ask him to use continuously, which is the right-click mouse equivalent. Okay? And now let's ask him to attack, which is the left mouse click, and also continuous mode. And here we get ourselves a simple cobblestone generator. Now, since he has steaks in his offhand and we ask him to use it continuously, when he gets hungry, he will eat and replenish his hunger. However, this would mean that we would still need to provide him with new steak and new pickaxes in case his pickaxes will break down. And if you're running the setup on a server, we can actually log out and he will actually keep the server loaded and running like any other logged player, because fake players behave exactly like normal players for the game. In general, the ability to set tasks and leave the server is a really powerful tool meant primarily for testing of contraptions, especially that fake players are actually affected by the tick rate, so you can speed up their work as well. But you might be tempted to use it as a survival tool as well. It's up to you, I'm not judging. As I mentioned at the beginning, if a real player tries to log in when a fake player with its name is on the server, the real player will replace the fake one. But this can be also reversed as well. As a normal player, you have access to most of the actions and apply them to yourself. You might not see some animations, but other players next to you will see them and no problems. And then, as long as you have your game running, you will be performing these actions. And what you do with your UI doesn't actually matter, as these actions will be called in server-side and performed server-side. But there's one more thing you can do. You can just type player and your name and shadow, and this will replace your player with a fake one with the same name and actions that you have scheduled as you have given them yourself. This method obviously works only on servers. In single player, there's only one player, and if you log out, you log out. But when you are back on the server, you should be able to continue where you left off. The player command is really powerful. I encourage you to explore all the options that come with it and let us know if there are other aspects that don't work as you would expect from your regular client. Draw command allows to very efficiently set blocks in shapes. For now it's just in form of a sphere, providing the block to fill, and optionally replace a specific block like air, exactly like you would do with the fill command. Why only spheres? Because spheres and cubes are the most basic shapes that you might need in general, and only spheres were missing in vanilla. For more complex shapes, I would encourage you to use script fill or use carpet to define your shapes. It's a very powerful tool, but for a simple case of a sphere, the draw command should have you covered. Fill limit is a very important setting that fixes a very important issue with vanilla tools. Normally, vanilla fill and clone commands are limited for no apparent reason to 32,000 block volume. Sounds like a lot, but that's only 32 by 32 by 32. Setting fill limit changes that artificial boundary to wherever you want, allowing you to very easily work with very large areas of blocks with fill jobs and clone jobs. Another really useful and related settings is fill updates, which if set to false will remove block updates caused by fill and clone command, as well as updates in structure blocks and inside carpet scripts, which also can set blocks. The ability of not causing updates is crucial in many aspects of the game, especially technical Minecraft, where copying areas with butted pistons and rail systems render vanilla fill and clone commands pretty much useless. With push limit, you can customize the piston push limit for your contraptions. It's mildly useful in survival because your contraption will not work for others, but as a temporary tool to get stuff going and then trying to work your way to minimize it, it makes actually pretty good sense. Rail power limit is a similar setting but affects how far powered rails will be powered from a powered source. Also very useful mostly for experimentation. Turning quasi-connectivity off disables quasi-connectivity for pistons, droppers and dispensers, so they only trigger when directly powered like all other redstone components. I guess it's not that useful since quasi-connectivity and bad powering are very important parts of technical Minecraft toolkit, but it's interesting to observe what would happen without it, I guess. Summon Natural Lightning allows lightning spawned with summon command behave like lightning in thunderstorms, having a chance to spawn skeleton horse traps. With portal creative delay turned on, all players regardless of game mode will respect delays to get through the portal, so it's easier to work with them in creative mode without constantly changing dimensions for no reason. With these settings on, player that holds an obsidian in their hand will have even longer delay, allowing to stay in portal blocks for an hour without changing the dimension. Explosion no block damage prevents TNT explosions to cause any damage to blocks, regardless if the TNT explodes in new liquids or not. This is very useful in testing contraptions with TNT without the risk of blowing your work up. Another useful TNT creative settings is TNT do not update, which prevents TNT blocks to update when placed by players. The last TNT related settings is TNT primer momentum removed, which removes the random offset to the sides when priming in TNT, so testing with TNT is much more predictable. Just don't forget to turn it off at the end and make sure your contraption can handle this random momentum before you ship it to others. Another setting that pertains more to the creative category is XP no cooldown, which removes 2 game tick cooldown for players to take in an XP orb. This removes all limits of players taking XP, but also removes the lag that builds up with large amount of XP orbs. If you'd want to use this setting in survival, consider another option, much more survival-like enhancement that offers similar functionality. Survival features and proposed improvements to survival mechanics. Our first more survival-like feature, although with all of them you'd have to be the judge whether you want to use them in survival gameplay or in creative only, is combine XP orbs, which causes XP orbs behave like items and combine in bigger XP orbs, so to speak, when they are near each other. Like the previous settings, which allows to inject unlimited amounts of XP, this one just follows normal combining rules for items, just applying them to XP orbs, hence it feels a little bit less creative. But the final effect is roughly the same. Flipping cactus makes 2 things happen. If you right click with a cactus on a block that we think you should be able to change its orientation, you will be able to rotate it or flip it. It acts similarly to the debug stick, except it will only allow you to affect orientation. Some things it will rotate, some things it will flip. In general, a very useful and not that overpowered tool. For certain blocks, like stairs, it matters where you hit it to determine the new position. What is important is that flipping blocks with flipping cactus doesn't cause any block updates. Cactus also has a functionality when held in the offhand, which in this case allows players to place blocks in the orientation opposite to the placement that would normally happen. Oh, and in case you click at top of a sand block with a cactus, ta-da! A cactus gets placed. Surprising, isn't it? With command camera mode enabled, players can switch safely between survival and spectator camera mode. Plenty servers allow players to have 2 accounts, with spectator account allowing to record player builds and also inspect the world, and regular survival accounts to play the game. Carpet allows to switch between these 2 modes without being OP. Just type /C to switch into the camera mode with night vision and dolphin's grace, and type /C to switch back to survival without these effects. The only concern is that this allows players to quickly change location and avoid sudden deaths, but that's unavoidable if you allow for these kind of transitions. With anti-cheat disabled turned on, the game will not penalize you for having bad connection or when the server lags behind. It will allow players to travel faster than the server thinks is reasonable, and it won't warp you back while flying because you have traveled too fast. Also, when you are trying to deploy with an elytra and the server thinks you are not eligible to do so, it will still allow you to fly. What the setting won't fix is your bad connection to the server, so if you can't fly because of that, it's on you. One player sleeping does what it says on the tin. Allows to skip the night with only 1 player sleeping. Enough said. Custom MODD will let you change in-game and on the fly the welcome text that shows up under the server login screen, rather than stopping the server mid-run and fiddling with the server properties to access it. Pretty handy tool. Missing tools, when turned on, applies custom breaking speeds for various blocks and corresponding tools. Pickaxes will allow you to break quickly pistons and glass, and you can use shears to break sponges quickly. Doesn't it just make sense? Rotator block, when turned on, will apply custom block rotations to blocks in front of them. As with the manual applications for cactus, this only applies to carefully selected blocks, but should provide you with all the custom functionality you would need. Following that is one of the stars of the carpet mod. It's movable block entities implementation by 202 name. The Mojang have said that it might be too hard to do, but we've been testing this solution for quite some time and we didn't find any obvious problems with it. Also, in other Minecraft versions like Bedrock, it works just fine, so shouldn't it work in Java as well, right? Silverfish drop gravel introduces a custom mechanic where a silverfish, when leaving stone blocks, would drop gravel items. Makes sense, don't you think so? It's also a non-DUP way of obtaining renewable gravel with plenty of potential concepts for a fast gravel farm to explore. So, to complete the circle, you would also want a renewable way of obtaining sand. And you can definitely do it by changing the husk loot tables to drop sand as well. It kinda makes sense. Mummies traverse deserts all their afterlife. It's expected for them to have some sand stuck in their pockets. To allow for a reasonable way of farming them, if you have husk spawning in temples enabled, there will be an exclusive spawn in desert temples and will be able to spawn without access to skylight. So you can build a farm for them like you would do with witches in witch huts, or guardians in ocean monuments, or pillagers in pillager outposts. On the same note, switching on a shulker spawning in end cities can allow shulkers to respawn in the bounding box of the end cities, so you can get these renewable shulker boxes without pruning end chunks, applying custom and very generous loot tables, or just exploit straight up duping. Speaking of shulker boxes, it does make sense that shulker boxes that can carry many different items inside don't stack, but that would be great if at least empty shulker boxes would stack up. And you can do that by enabling stackable shulker boxes. With this rule turned on, you can stack empty shulker boxes by dropping them on the ground and just picking them back up. But you have to be careful when moving them about, since outside of that they will still behave like unstackable items. So use shift click to move them across inventories and containers. And if you are worried that when you go back to vanilla that would break your game, fear not, the game is kinda expecting you to do similar things to this one and doesn't have any problems with that. Speaking of weird stuff, do you know that there are parrots in the game? I know, it's easy to forget them since there might be the hardest mob to farm because of the ocelots and not easy way to capture them, and they're actually pretty useless. They are supposed to accompany players to warn them about impending danger, but every time a player jumps or steps down, they just fall off. With persistent parrot settings turned on, you can take them on, you can jump with them, you can get on horses, you can even fly, and still you'll have ways to take them off. They still don't like water, and also they don't like when you take damage. Persistent parrot settings makes parrots a little bit more useful in vanilla game. Another setting you might want to consider turning on forever is kelp generation growth limit. You see, the update Aquatic brought a lot of life into the oceans, maybe a little too much. The kelp patches that form with world generation still have tips that will grow up to 25 more blocks if left untouched. This makes so that the really nice looking ocean depths, after players spending a few nights in the area, get overgrown with kelp up to the water limit to the point that there is nothing else to see. By setting a custom limit with kelp generation, you are limiting the maximum allowed growth of world gen kelp to this height. So even chunks where a player spends a lot of time in, ocean floors still look as good as they did at the beginning. This does not apply to player placed kelp, so don't worry about your kelp farms. There are a few other interesting features that provide some custom mechanics to obtain some non-renewable resources. With desert shrubs turned on, saplings placed in arid climates without the access to water will dry out and turn into desert bushes. Kinda makes sense and also allows to obtain desert bushes in a non-destructive and renewable way. Also, corals has been badly hit with the update in terms of the renewability. While we got the mechanics when applying a bonemeal underwater we get coral plants, Coral blocks remain non-renewable in decent quantities, which makes beautiful coral reefs quite endangered in-game. With renewable corals turned on, you can grow coral underwater from coral plants, like you would normally do with trees from saplings, just bone mealing them. I know it's not realistic, corals need years to grow, but so is realistic getting likely a couple hundred years old sequoia with a few applications of a fertilizer, so I think getting corals this way it absolutely makes sense. Last renewable resource you can get with carpet is renewable sponges. Like lightning converts mushrooms to shroomus, pigs to pigmen, and villagers to witches, when enabling renewable sponges, lightning also converts regular guardians to elder guardians, hence providing the ability to farm sponges in a very spectacular way. There are two more features of the carpet mod that do not do much by themselves, but aggregate and simplify access to other functionalities. First is placing carpets, which can be turned on with carpets true. I can bet $100 that's where the name of the silly mod came from. And I would win because I came up with it. The idea was to allow to run some repetitive commands and checks by placing carpets of certain colors. And to have them working, you not only need to have carpets enabled, but also each individual function for that as well. In this case, pink carpet is the same as running a spawn list command to list potential spawns in a specific block. Black carpets output spawn command information. Black carpet placed on anything displays mob caps, and placed on certain colored walls show loaded entities from that class. That changes when spawn tracking is going. In this case, placing it anywhere shows tracking report, and placing on a respective mob category wall shows recent spawns from that mob category, similar to what you would have by typing a command directly. Here you just saved a little bit on typing. Brown carpets are specifically useful because they serve as a proxy for distance command. Sneak placing a carpet or placing a carpet the first time says the initial point, and then the regular place assumes the other end of the measuring tape and prints out the measuring results. Especially handy so you don't need to type all of these coordinates again and again and again. Just placing carpets, super easy. Gray carpet replaces the block info command, providing all the information about the block below it. Again, saves you typing a command on and on again if you have multiple blocks to check. Green carpets, when placed on the various wool blocks, will display current item counters for that channel, and red carpet will reset these counters respectively. So that's the secret behind the carpet mod, its name at least. Second meta command is log command, which provides player-specific information in a more direct and continuous way. The logging information will be remembered per player across player relogging to the server, but to stay in spirit of the carpet mod and not encroaching on vanilla player data, player selection will be forgotten across server and game restarts. Log TPS displays condensed server health information in the tab screen right below player names, updated every second like you would by typing tick health every second. In single player, these numbers and the internal server performance MSPT should show exactly the same number, but if you are connected to the server, you won't see this information in the debug screen, so there is your advantage here. Log counter allows to display concise information about current item rate for a given counter in a continuous way, so you can focus on the rates rather than continuously spam chat to find the current numbers there. Log mobcaps displays continuously mobcap information so you can identify at a glance issues with the mob spawning or assess your mob farm design, although for more detailed information you would probably want to run a spawn tracking report. There are also a bunch of loggers that do not have a corresponding command or a carpet feature. Log pathfinding shows with particles all the pathfinding attempts of mobs that took longer than n milliseconds to complete, where n is the number that you have selected by subscribing to it. Log packets shows the count of server-side packets incoming and outgoing from the server. If you are playing single player, that number should correspond to the debug screen RX field, which is a client-side number of received packets. But if you are playing on a server, logged packets will show the total traffic that the server deals with, not only with your client. Log TNT will track the ignition location and final explosion position of any TNT entity in the world, useful in debugging precise TNT contraptions like TNT cannons. Log projectiles does the same with projectiles, tracking their position tick by tick for a change, giving you precise tracking for every moment of projectile's life. Exactly the same output you'll get by tracking falling blocks, except they have their own categories to track. With several of them at the same time is kinda clean to use, but with too many at the same time it kinda gets messy. And there's this script command. I wonder what it does. I guess you can just use it as a calculator. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's kinda cool. Just kidding. Script command is an interface to Scarpet. Carpet mod in-game programming engine that allows you to run custom scripts and implement a new in-game behaviors without additional modding of the game. I won't be getting into Scarpet details because that would make this video 3 times longer than it is right now, but I would point to some previous Carpet mod features that got removed due to much greater flexibility when they are part of the actual programming API, not just the command API. One of those features is a plop feature, which allows to plop game structures and features on demand. This very well could have its own command, but it's so much more flexible as an API function. And you can still use it if you just want to plop a structure of some sort. Second feature that used to be in 1.12 version of Carpet mod is set biome, changing the biome in an area, which you can still do by running script scan, for example, instead. Please refer to the previous videos about Scarpet and Scarpet API documentations for details on the capabilities of Scarpet programming language. Just as a side note, in 1.15, set biome command actually affects a 4x4x4 cube area. And right now it's only limited to only 16 plops per chunk. But that might change soon, we'll see. So that would be it in terms of the core Carpet mod features. While certain Carpet features like loggers, AI trackers, as well as Carpet itself are and will be likely actively developed further, and if the new vanilla bugs will be popping out, the new bug fixes will be getting added to the Carpet mod as well, the feature set of Carpet mod is pretty much restricted to what we have seen right now. Since Carpet moved to Fabric, it's now very easy to expand its features as a Carpet extension mods, the main one being Carpet Extra. So if you are worried, where are the other features that you have probably heard about that are not very vanillish or may modify your world, so it may not be compatible with vanilla anymore, or are simply just fun and wonky new concepts like autocrafting table, or dispensers placing blocks, or dispensers reassembling minecarts, or another approach to renewable packed ice, and many others, please check out the Carpet Extra mod. In general, to run Carpet mod is very easy, both for single player as well as servers. Just install Fabric Loader in your launcher for the game version you want to use, grab the latest Carpet mod from the release page of the GitHub project, and dump it into the mods folder along with other Fabric mods you want to use. One administrative thing I forgot to talk about is that if you're a server admin and you don't want to allow messing up with the Carpet settings and features in-game and only allow certain features to be available, just go to your world folder and edit Carpet conf file. Go to the top and start with a single word locked, and from now on the Carpet command will not be available in this world, as well as all other commands will be disabled by default. And then you can proceed with enabling each feature that you would want to enable. Then if anybody would log into that world, they won't see the Carpet command nor any other Carpet features except for these that you explicitly turned on.
One little boost to the surface later.
So that would be it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new about the Carpet mod, and if you did or want to show me your support, don't forget to leave me a like. If you have any suggestions, don't forget to leave them down in the comments, and if you are new to the channel, smash that subscribe button for more such content in the future. Oh, and there is one more thing. There are 3 harmless Easter eggs at the time of this recording in the Carpet mod. I wonder who will be the first one to find all of them. See you guys in the next one. Bye bye.